All right, verse 10 of Jude or Judah or Yehuda would be the correct name of the book. It says, but these people disparage all the things that they do not understand and all the things that they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals. By these things they are destroyed. And more people. So there's this word to accept or await in there. It is the sometimes translated waiting anxiously for. It is a present middle participle plural indicating the same sense as the Hebrew word kavah, which means wait, look for, or hope for. So our word anxious has a sense of uncomfortability to it. Okay. That is not what is being conveyed here. Okay. It's not what Judah has in mind. It's more like scooting forward on the edge of your chair, leaning forward and waiting for any moment that God's going to show up. So it's an exciting thing, not a negative, anxious kind of thing. It's not fretting or worrying type thing. It's like watching your
Which
clock.
word are you doing?
It's the word prosdecomai. I mean, maybe I'm quoting from verse 9 here. If it, no, it wasn't verse 9, so it's in verse 10. But these people disparage all things that they do not understand, all things they do not know, but by like run reason by these things they are destroyed. Maybe I am out of sync here with this. Give me 1 second.
Oh,
We need to remember mercy.
also, we have
Disparage all things that they do not understand. They know, I don't know. Maybe this is out of sync with my notes. Where so hold that. Well, so just understand
this.
in Hebrew, if you say wait, you're waiting expectantly, positively for something. Okay. So we'll find. This is out. Somehow I've got this out of sync in my notes. So let's do this. Let's go to the next word. Things they don't know is first in the Greek text. So in that sentence, but these people disparage all the things that they do not understand or know. Okay. So in the Greek text, the first phrase is all the things that they do not understand, but these people disparage. Okay. So in the Greek language, the thing that you want to put the importance on in a sentence comes first. So when we translate this into English, we've already kind of misunderstood their language. So things they don't know is the first phrase or clause in the Greek text, okay? And the phrase uses this verb oida, to know or understand. And as we have noted before, this is not about collecting facts. Facts are about gnosko. It's where we get the word gnosis from, as in the Gnostics, okay? But rather it's intuitive. It's an instinctual knowing, as the rest of the verse will confirm. So the Gnostics, or what we would call the modern day Illuminatists, are all about mathematics. Everything is math. Everything is science. If you just have all the science figured out, you will rule the world. Okay. Um, so see now this is so weird. So now my text has exactly the same thing on the previous thing, and it goes into this all about hope again. Clearly, I must have been under the influence of rose oil. Okay, so let's move to blasphemy. That's in the verse, right? So there's all things they don't understand, and all the things they know by instinct, unreasoning animals. Yes, okay. Blasphemy. So blasphema in the Greek literature means abusive speech, personal mockery, or blasphemy. And again, my notes have the exact same thing. Wow, something got globally fixed here. Okay, so let's see here. These people disparage all the things that they do not understand, all the things that they know by instinct. So this they are this is including the word blasphemy is this disparage. But these people disparage, they blaspheme all the things that they do not understand. Okay. So again, in the Greek language, this word blasphemia, it includes abusive speech, personal mockery, and then blasphemy. Okay.
Mine says revile.
Sure. Okay, next word is physikos. So Judah calls people who exhibit such actions like creatures without reason. This is physikos in the Greek. But the term is used only here in the New Testament in this form. It is not found in Hebrew equivalents. So in other words, we don't find it anywhere in the Septuagint in the Old Testament. So kind of hard to come up with exactly what that might mean because this is the only place in the world it's used. So there are occurrences of these words in non-canonical material, which Jude undoubtedly knew about. Okay. Okay, this is getting really weird. So I've went through 6 slides and every note says exactly the same thing. Give me just a second, because that means I have lost the next 20 verses of notes.
Oh dear.
So exciting.
This is Jude verse 10, right?
Yes. So in my program here, Keynote, it has slides that I could use, and then it has presenter notes underneath, and that's where I stick all of my notes. But now all of the notes are always the same for that one slide. So, wow. The question is, what happened? Hang in there, guys.
But I don't have the word blasphemy at all.
Oh, yeah, it's not going to show up as blasphemy for you in your Bible. Give me a second. I'm going to pause the recording. And welcome back. Okay, so oida versus gnosko, okay? Things they don't know is first in the Greek text, the phrase uses the verb oida, and like we talked about before, this is an instinctual knowing, okay? So they do not understand. We read that in English and we think, oh, yeah, they don't get all the doctrinal stuff. They don't comprehend the facts, okay? They haven't done an investigation. And that is not what Jude is saying here, okay? Jude uses the Greek verb that uses intuitive understanding, like we would use the word a woman's intuition. Okay. That is not about going out and gathering the evidence and filtering it all out. Okay. Examining theories and testing things. That's gnosko. Okay. That's Gnosticism. Okay. Oida comes with a sense of emotional truth to it. So I know it in my heart. It's not, I've memorized it. Okay. So in, in 1492, Columbus sailed the
Ocean blue.
ocean blue. Okay. So that's memorized fact, right? Okay. But that's not you knowing Columbus did this. Okay. Oida is something I feel to be true. It's my moral compass pointing towards something. Okay. What he's saying is these men have lost their ability to feel what is true. So as a result of that, they do what? They revile things. Okay. So in the Greek text, the English speak evil of is the verb blasphemio. Okay. To blaspheme. It's a really strong word. And they have lost their inner sense of truth and they speak what is ultimately blasphemy. But I don't know that you would see any English Bible stick the word blasphemy there. So, in other words, this word blasphemy, they speak words in opposition to everything we know about the tradition and about God, because they no longer have this inner sense of truth within them. Shaul, Paul might say it this way: they do not have the Spirit in them or within them. They operate within the assembly. Remember, these are believers in the congregation, right? And they might subscribe to a statement of faith, but their behavior is one that shows the Spirit is no longer with them. There is something about their lives that just doesn't ring true. And that's what Judah is trying to point out here. So let's take a moment and look at blasphemy from a Septuagint and a Judaic background context, okay? Blasphemia in the Septuagint and Judaism. In the Septuagint, it has no fixed or Hebrew original. It always has a reference to God. For example, disputing his power in 2 Kings 19:4, desecrating his name, Isaiah 52:5, violating his glory, Ezekiel 35:12, wicked speech, Isaiah 66:3, human arrogance, Leviticus 24:11. The religious sense is predominant in Philo's writings. For the rabbis, speaking impudently about the law, idolatry, shaming God's name, these are all blasphemy. Okay. So blasphemy in the New Testament is a violation of God's power and majesty. It may be directly against God, Revelation 13:6, his name, Romans 2:24, the word, Titus 2:5, Moshe, Acts 6:11, angelic beings, Jude 8-10, 2 Peter 2:10-12. The concept is a Hebraic one, hence Yeshua seems to be blaspheming when he forgives sins, Mark 2:7, or claims to be the Messiah, Mark 14, thus making himself equal to God, John 10:33. So it comes across to his audience as blasphemy. That's why they're so upset. Okay, back to this word physikos now. It's the only time that it's used. It is interesting that he calls them instinctual, like creatures without reason. This is actually a really important verse that many commentaries kind of just skate over. And we skate over it because we think, oh yeah, they don't have spiritual awareness, but it goes much deeper than that. So if you go back to Genesis, Bereshit 1:26 and 27, you'll see that the way God creates human beings at all is with his breath. But it does not breathe animation into him. He breathes the breath of God into them. So human beings who have been abandoned, who have abandoned that inner sense of the breath of God, which is the inner truth that they have, become less than human. They're still alive. They're just like the animals. This is the key. What it suggests is what it makes you human from a Greek perspective is your reasoning ability. What makes you a human from a Hebraic perspective is the breath of God in you. And if the breath of God is not in you, as Jude points out, you have devolved into what? Being nothing more than an instinctual animal. You are no longer a human being. So keep in mind, in the Hebraic language, the word ruach, okay, like the ruach hakodesh, the Holy Spirit, right? The word ruach can mean several different things. So in a Christian world, our default usage of that is going to be spirit, okay? But it also means breath, and it also means wind, okay? Breath, wind, spirit. So in Genesis 1, when it says in the beginning was the word, Genesis, in the beginning was the heavens and the earth. God made the heavens and the earth. And the Ruach was hovering over the earth. So I don't know that I've ever seen a translation that didn't say spirit there. But it could literally just as well be breath. I suppose it would be hard to make the case for wind because you need a troposphere and climate to make wind happen. Wind doesn't happen in space. So even though we talk about solar winds, so it just as well could be just that his breath was hovering over the earth instead of, again, like in Hebrew likes really concrete things. Okay, it doesn't like concepts as much. So in the Greek world, it's all about concepts. Okay, and so they stand in the what is that? The agora, the marketplace, and the speakers, not the prophets, the speakers, the orators. It says they would gesticulate their hands as they're describing things, and they're talking about the Spirit, okay, and it's this thing that you can't grasp because it's a concept, okay, but in the Hebrew word they went breath. It's that thing that comes out of your mouth. You can feel that. You can feel its effects. Okay. Or it's the wind. I look out and so last weekend I went up snowshoeing. And I got done snowshoeing and I went up to the ski lodge to check it out, have lunch, got done, drove back, and I stopped at a place called McCready Hot Springs. Okay. Which is like a mud pit, but it's really warm. And so hop into the mud pit, it's like 110 degrees. And it felt great after snowshoeing, right? It's kind of like a poor man's hot tub. And I'm sitting there for about an hour stretching, felt great. There's another family, they're all laying, sitting in the hot spring. And she says to her kids, "Hey kids, lay on your back and look up at the trees." And so I'm like, I'm joining in on this. I want to see what's up there. And I lay down and I look up and here are all these trees, and you can see the tops of them blowing in the wind. Right. And I'm thinking, the Spirit, the wind, it's the breath of God moving those trees. Okay. That's the way the Hebraic mindset works. That's the breath of God. It's the wind. I can't see it, but I can see its effects. So I know that it's there, because I can see the effects of it. I know the tree is moving outside my window because I see the leaves moving, in the branches, right? Okay. So I'm measuring its effects. So if the breath of God is not in you, as Jude points out, then you have devolved into something less than a human being. You're an instinctual animal. But I don't know about you guys, but this explains a whole Gehenna a lot about what's happening in the world today and human history. Judah is essentially saying those people, whether they're part of the assembly or not, who have rejected the authority of the tradition, which stems from Moshe, and have lost respect for the people who bring that tradition to them, operate in ways that they have lost track of that inner spirit, breath that God put in them that makes them human. And they now act like animals, and their ethical behavior and their morality shows it. That's Jude's argument. So you don't have to go around asking people, do you have the Spirit? Are you Spirit filled? Wasn't that the whole 70s and 80s? Are you Spirit filled? Okay. You're supposed to be able to look and see. You measure the effects of the Spirit in them. And if they're acting like animals and acting in ways that are in opposition to the character of God, then something has happened in them, so that they are no longer in connection with the Spirit of God that created them as humans. Now, just hit me. Did I hit record again?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Hate to lose all of that. So last night, again, I always find it interesting, like when I study these things, God just keeps providing little vignettes in my life to make things make sense, right? So last night, just before Sabbath is starting, I'm down having actually no, this wasn't last night. This was 2 nights ago. Having drinks with friends, sitting at this table. One of the waitresses comes up. She kind of goes to the same church that they do, and a very new believer kind of thing. And so she's now started dating this guy, we find out. And he's over at the bar. And eventually he comes over and he introduces himself to us because she has to get our validation that this is a good choice. Never ask me for validation. And so he shakes everybody's hands and stuff, and he looks at me, he goes, "So what do you do?" And I used my typical line. I said, I beat children, I sell drugs, and I human traffic. Which one do you want to know about? And he goes, "Well, let's start with the first one. Why do you beat children?" And I said, "Well, I have a karate school right across the street." And he goes, "Oh." And it's so funny how this happens in life. Like if I had said I was a trauma surgeon, he would not ask me to perform an appendectomy right there. Okay. But when you say you do the martial arts, everybody questions you on this. They want to know how good are you, right? So this guy's like, I don't know, 6'5". I mean, he's a very big guy. He's probably 65 years old or something like that. Pretty good shape. I'm sitting in a bar stool. And he throws an elbow strike at my face. And I don't flinch at all. I'm just looking at him. And he goes, "What would you do if someone did that to you?" And I said, "Do you notice that my foot is now between your legs?" And he looks down and he goes, "When did that get there?" I said, "About a second before you threw that elbow. And my hand's now on my pistol. Do you have any doubt I could take you out?" "No." Walks away. And I'm just thinking, okay, you didn't get my validation for this guy. This guy, he has a man who is filled with the Spirit doesn't act that way. He doesn't need to act that way. That is not being manly, okay? That's not being meek. So yeah, she asked later, what'd you think of him? Not much. So, but see, what I'm doing is I'm making it, I'm making an inference. Did the wind blow or did the wind not blow? We're called to make that judge. It's okay to make that judgment. We're fruit inspectors. The fruit does not get to tell you, I'm a really good piece of fruit, man. What happens is you taste the fruit and then you know if it's good fruit. We make those judgments by the implications, by the consequences, by the growth that's happened inside the fruit, right? So Abraham Heschel wrote, when the world becomes immoral, worship becomes detestable. When the world becomes immoral, worship becomes detestable. So all you have to do is look at the ethics of the world and you can see the power of animal instinct. Greed, self-preservation, authority by power alone. The guy with the biggest gun wins, disregard of the poor, the orphans, the widows, all that kind of stuff that Moshe teaches us that we need to be responsible for is pushed aside. And when that happens, people do whatever they want, and they do whatever they want in a religious culture also. Remember, the people Judah is talking to are not outsiders. They're insiders. And he's not saying, hey, look at these pagans over here. Okay. How terrible are they? He's saying, look inside and see what's happening here. Remember, Yeshua told us, he says, check out your own house first. So 2 Peter 2:12 uses this word physikos. It's the parallel of Jude 10. And Jude 10 is arguing that the false teachers who are probably claiming redemption from nature are destroyed by things that they know only naturally and irrationally. So 2 Peter 2:12 carries a similar comparison. Those who claim to have knowledge are in fact like irrational animals, creatures of instinct. In fact, the actual Greek says alogozoa, living things without reason. So if there's no reason, everything's done by instinct. All right, so the Septuagint and the Pseudepigraphica. There are several occurrences of these words in non-canonical text, mentioned that. So there's no Hebrew original for physicists. This term seems to be really rare. It's only used 3 to 4 times, only used a few times in 3rd and 4th Maccabees and the Book of Wisdom, once in the Testaments of the 12. In these works, we find the usual sense of nature, species, aptitude, universal nature, physical nature. In Wisdom 13:1, it says that the Gentiles are ignorant of God by nature. You can contrast that with Romans 1:19. The testimony of Naphtali, chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, refers to the natural order that the watchers of Genesis 6:1 and the Sodomites pervert. This may be connected to the Jewish idea of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov. So for those that familiar with that, so we go back to Genesis chapter 3, and we have this idea of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov, the evil inclination or the good inclination that exists inside of us. the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov, the good and bad inclination, got replaced within Christianity, thank you to the Catholics, with the doctrine of original sin. Okay. Okay. Next, this word destruction. Phatherio. Jude's declaration is that these sorts of Homo sapiens will meet with destruction. Phatherio. The term has a wider range of meaning. It does mean to destroy in the middle and passive, to perish. It is often used as to be killed. It can mean to languish, like in prison. Economic ruin may also be in view here. This may be related to a popular Greek philosophy of the time. Greek philosophy opposes perishing to becoming. The cosmos abides, the parts are subject to corruption. So again, the earth was the bad place, the heavens were the good place. Okay. So the goal is to get to heaven in a Greek worldview. You want to be with the gods, you want to be gods. And this is very much in contrast. Well, in Christianity, that would be a complete normal follow-through. In a Hebraic understanding of the Bible, we're all supposed to be staying down here on earth for millennial kingdom and all eternity, right? So very polar opposites there. So the antonyms patharton and apatharton increasingly acquire a religious rather than a natural or ontological sense in a contrast to the divine world and the earthly world. What is immutable does not lie in the cosmos and its principles or its elements. We see that in Colossians, or abiding relations, but in what transcends it. So although Plutarch, early historian, and philosopher, can call the atoms or all incorruptible, the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, pathero is the rendering of the Hebrew word shachat, which carries the various senses of corruption, decay, destruction, depravity, disfigurement. We see this in Jeremiah 13:7, 48:18. Isaiah 52:14. So for the Hebrew terms, the Septuagint group will reference killing, blemishes and offerings, destruction to the pit, moral corruption, to overthrow something. I think when I was in the Hebrew classes, overthrow was probably the word we used most. Laying waste and fading or sinking down exhausted. Okay, so it has a very wide range of words that can describe that moral decay. Okay, verse 11. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and for pay they have given themselves up to the error of Balaam and perished in the rebellion of Korach. So let's start breaking this apart. So it's woe, not whoa. Okay, so make sure, Chris, make sure you take that and correct that in there.
Okay, fine.
Never want to say whoa.
Changes the meaning, you know.
If you say whoa to your horse, he might be upset, right? So this is the form of speech that is typical of the prophets and the intertestamental writers. It's really funny. So in the Hebrew, woe, which also, like, you know, in King Jamesian English became like oh or alas. Okay, in Hebrew it's oy. So this is where we get the phrase oy vey. Okay, very good, strong Yiddish kind of thing. But you'll hear this in a lot of old movies that have Jewish actors, and you know they're kvetching along in the dialogue, and someone will go oy vey or oy gewalt, right? So oy actually starts with an aleph. So the first time I ran into this, I was like, what is this word? I have no clue, because I'm looking for a W for woe. But it indicates judgment or despair. Okay. And such judgment is not necessarily eschatological. It's not an end times judgment. Okay. Indeed, in the Old Testament and the Tanakh, it was normally temporal. It was about what was going on right at that moment. Like, oh crud, I'm going to fall off a cliff. Okay. It's about now. It's not about I'm falling off a cliff in 4,000 years. Okay. So he gives 3 examples here, 3 Tanakh figures that he wants us to draw a picture from. Okay. The first one is Cain. The second one is Bilam. And the third one is Korach. Okay. So we have to now determine as the audience, what is the picture that connects them all? We have to determine what is the connector for all 3. So the phrase
Rebellion.
no skipping to the end. Walked in the way of Cain is the first one. And it's a more correct and common Greek expression for moral behavior. Okay. So what was the way of Cain? What was the error of Cain? It's a complete lack of responsibility for the other and a denial of the authority of God. Okay. So Cain brings his sacrifice, and the sacrifice was found unacceptable. So what does God say to Cain? You bad boy, you shouldn't have done that. No. What does he say? He says, listen, go make it right. It's going to be fine. There's no punishment at all. Okay. Just go away, bring back the proper sacrifice, and everything will be fine. But what does Cain do? He goes after his brother whose sacrifice was acceptable. He denies his own situation, and he blames the one who is doing the right thing. So Abel's sacrifice was accepted. Cain's was not. Cain blames Abel, likely because he thinks he should have helped him. Why? Because I'm not about to admit I did wrong. Even though Yah tells me that. And he provides me a way back. And he says, just make it correct and our relationship will be fine. Cain finds the one in the right relationship and kills him because that's going to make it better. So God comes to Cain and says, where's your brother? Now, there are 2 words in Hebrew for where. One relates to geographic, okay, a location. The other is an expression of confusion. In other words, why isn't he where he's supposed to be? This is the same expression that Yah uses when he encounters Adam in the garden. How come you're not here with me? Okay, where's your brother? I'm confused why this is happening. Where is he? Classic response, am I my brother's keeper? To which the answer is yes. Yes, you are. You are your brother's keeper. At which point God says to Cain, the bloods, plural, okay, the bloods of your brother cry out from the ground to me. So this isn't, it never gets translated correctly in the English. It is a plural word in the Hebrew. So that has some interesting implications. We should be asking, what does that mean? So it means that Cain's execution of Abel is genocide, not murder, because he has killed everyone in the line who is supposed to come from Abel.
So it's saying, so you're saying that that Abel had more descendants and Cain went and killed them all.
Correct. It was genocide.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying the Hebrew words are saying it. It's a plural word. Now, what we would do in English, we'd go, well, you can't have just one drop of blood. So it's in the plural. And we make lots of excuses for this thing. You can have 1 drop of blood. Every morning I do my blood test on my finger and I get 1 drop of blood. Possible, right? So again, the text is there for us to ask questions of. And sadly, in English, we don't get good translations sometimes, so we don't know what questions to ask. So back to Judah's point, woe to them that have gone the way of Cain. It's not that they've murdered someone. He's not calling them murderers, okay? Because of their actions within the assembly, they have perpetrated genocide on everyone who will be influenced by them. So an entire line of people that will come from their mistakes has now been put into action. Let me bring it home for you on this one. There was this German monk, his name was Luther, and he came up with a whole bunch of doctrines that the church has been following ever since. I really would hate to be him on Judgment Day, because he sent giant swaths of people down the wrong road based on some of his doctrines. Okay. So one in particular would be this idea of replacement theology. The idea that somehow the church replaced Israel because God abandoned Israel and installed the church as the new Israel. That alone has destroyed more lives than we can count. Millions upon millions of people were killed in the name of the church for the way of righteousness. And it all started from what Judah is saying here. They refused the authority of Moshe and the sovereignty of a Jewish God, and they made up their own God and moved in the direction of the church. And they built their theology around it, the manifest destiny of the Christian church to rule the world at the expense of the Jews. And we're seeing it play out over in their land today. The pogroms started in the 1st century, and they have continued the history of mankind, killing off Jews because God doesn't accept them anymore. And Martin Luther was the worst of all of them. We have this doctrine of imputed righteousness that came from him. It's just bizarre, right? But it's what the church believes today. And if you want to be a part of the church, you're supposed to accept those doctrines, even though they're not in the Bible. So Cain becomes the symbol of the actions of morally corrupt false teachers. Again, we should notice that Jude expects his readers to know the story. And since it's not in the Dead Sea Scroll copies of Genesis or 1st Enoch, he must expect that his reader knows both types of early literature. Jude draws no canonical distinction between the 2 groups of sacred documents. That doesn't exist in his world. They're all sacred documents. Okay, continuing on. And for pay, they have given themselves up to the error of Balaam. So the word the error, plane, means wandering or seduction. The Greek syntax reads, and the error of Balaam for pay, they have rushed headlong into, placing the emphasis on the word error and pay. So planao and apoplanao can mean to lead astray or to deceive, whether through conduct, speech, or writing. So the labyrinth leads astray geographically, but obscurity of reality or concepts does so in a theoretical or ethical matter. Again, the Greeks were all about concepts, right? Because you can hide things with concepts. If something's just blatant right in your face, it's hard to hide it, right? So planeo seldom denotes secular deceiving. Religious seduction, which leads to idolatry, is the work of false prophets and unfaithful rulers. Significant in the Septuagint is the negative judgment expressed in the group, first relative to Israel, then to the Gentiles. Erring is not due to metaphysical dualism, but refusing to hear and obey God. Again, how does the greatest commandment start? Hear, O Israel. So that word hear means not only to listen, but it means to obey. Okay? So once you get rid of Moses, once you get rid of that, listen and obey, what do you got left? Just, SMU. So you guys know the story. God inspires the enemy of Israel. He hires the prophet of Israel to predict and provide a curse against Israel so that he can win in battle. Balaam accepts the money, but when he goes out to deliver the curse, he realizes he's doing something against the sovereignty of God. And it creates all kind of hassles with the king. How come you didn't curse them? The point is, Balaam took money in order to accomplish a religious action in opposition to God. And, you could have just substituted Judas in that same passage. Now, Jude, in using examples from the authoritative text of the Tanakh, so he does not likely use Judas as the example, right? Because Judas hadn't happened at that point. But it's the same idea. So that's the word plano, or error, in that verse. Now let's look at pay. For pay, the New Testament uses misthos for the word pay. Jude accuses these people of deliberately profiting from their false teaching. They desire profit. Thus, the example of Balaam, who was the prophet for profit. One second to fix something here. Okay. Third example, Korach, number 16. You can review the whole story. So Jude's final example comes from the story of Bamidbar, Numbers. Korach is a perfect example of what Judah is trying to get at. Korach is part of the assembly. He is one of the children of Israel. He comes out of Egypt, and he is as Jewish as Moses is, okay? His claim is this: I'm Jewish just like you. Why should you be the one in charge? What he does not realize is that by challenging Moshe, he's actually challenging God. What he's saying is God's selection of Moshe as the proper authority didn't agree with me. And the result was Korach and his entire following got swallowed up by the earth. Now, there's a group of people I wouldn't want to be a part of. So again, it's about challenging authority, particularly authority established by God. So Korach became the symbol of the rebellious person, not just in the Jewish culture, but also in Christian circles. So the word that Judah uses is antilogia. Okay, and did you see logia in there? So anti is against, opposite, right? So logia would be where we get logic. Okay, it's what we would translate it usually as dispute. But this is not the word found in the Septuagint. The word found in the Septuagint is stasis, or episystasis. So Jude focuses on the verbal challenge, not the physical act of rebellion. Jude's choice of the Greek word for dispute demonstrates that his concern is with the challenge to authority. The result is obvious. They were destroyed in full view of the entire assembly, Jude is suggesting the same fate for these false teachers. So why does Yehuda use the three examples, Cain, Bilam, and Korach? What Jude is pounding away at 3 times, okay, is the lack of authority, lack of authority, lack of authority. They do not accept the tradition that has been handed down to them, nor do they respect the relationship they have with their superiors. Just a second here to look. I want to start 12 here. Yeah, let's so let's do verse, we'll do one more verse 12 here. So these men are hidden reefs in your love feasts. When they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear, clouds they are without water, carried about of winds, trees whose fruit withers, without fruit, twice dead, uprooted. All right, a little background. So until 250 CE, Common Era, AD, right? What later became the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper was celebrated as a festival or a fellowship meal. It was a potluck following the rituals of broken bread and wine in the Jewish tradition. Only much later did the church convert this into, quote unquote, the Mass and a sacrament. Okay, Jude uses a term that means feasting, so not just eating. Okay, it's something beyond eating. So when I grew up in the Catholic Church, in the Protestant church, if someone said, "What are you doing on Sunday?" I'd say, "Well, Sunday morning we're going to service," right? But a Catholic would say, "Sunday morning I'm going to Mass." Okay, so that event was referred to as the Mass, right? So that didn't develop until, much later, okay? But at the Mass was the ceremony of the Eucharist, of the breaking of the bread and the wine, okay? And that represented this Jewish tradition of a fellowship meal, okay? Jude's problem is that these false teachers who are part of the assembly are attending this festive meal, a meal which is intended to honor the Messiah, whom they reject. So this is especially true when the time of the festival was also a time of prophetic announcement, but maybe not in the way we think of prophecy today. The phrase, without fear, feed themselves, is really about shepherding themselves. That is, not recognizing God's proper authority and acting as if they can determine godly behavior for themselves. Again, this goes back to that whole ethical, moral thing, right? It's possible to read the Hebrew of Ezekiel 34:2 as, "Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, to those shepherding, thus saith Yehovah Adonai, woe, shepherds of Israel who are shepherding themselves. Should not those shepherding shepherd the sheep?" So the message is the same. Example after example of Judah warning that these people are part of the assembly, but they are like hidden reefs. You don't see them until you crash. So you see them like clouds without rain. So you get hope for your crops, and then no rain materializes. They're like trees in the autumn without fruit, doubly dead. first, because they didn't bear fruit, and second, because they're uprooted and carried off and burned because they didn't bear the fruit. So you can think about the metaphors that Yeshua uses that speak of the same idea. He uses these three examples to show that what you have in your assembly is so dangerous that you need to start really paying attention, not to their words, because they might be like Bilam saying the right words, but pay attention to their actions. You need to look underneath the leaves to see what the fruit is. I was having a conversation. Rich stopped by to give me some stuff when I was fixing my car, and we were having a conversation about the ice storm and the damage and all the trees and stuff. And he was talking about on the road out to their house, through Jasper and stuff. And he says, there's all these houses that I didn't know were there because all the trees got knocked down and all the leaves got knocked down. And now all of a sudden you discover there's all these houses that you would drive by, but you would just never notice, right? You got to look under the leaves to see what's really there. And you might be surprised. So Jude uses two metaphors to describe this situation. First, clouds without water carried along by the wind. In other words, clouds that look like they should produce something, but in fact produce nothing. See the metaphor? Consider the parallel in Proverbs 25:14. Like clouds and wind without rain is a person who boasts of his gifts falsely. There's also a similar passage in 1 Enoch chapter 80, verse 2. 80, verse 2 through 6, sorry. And in the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields. And all the things of the earth shall alter and shall not appear in their time. And the rain shall be kept back, and the heavens shall withhold it. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward, and shall not grow in their time, and the fruits of the trees shall be withheld in their time. And the moon shall not alter her order, and not appear at her time. And in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west, and shall shine more brightly than accords with the order of light. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order, and they shall alter the orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. So we have expectations and expectations not being met, right? Jude's second metaphor is autumn leaves without fruit. So his metaphor reminds us of the necessity that prophetic teaching result in fruit for the assembly. So in this case, these people not only do not produce the expected edification of the body, they are also twice dead. Once because there's no result, and twice because in the end, they will be judged and uprooted for that. Now, there's a final verb used here, ekrizu, means to uproot. It's in the aorist tense. And that means Jude considers it as if it had already occurred. So when he says, fruit withers without fruit, twice dead, uprooted, again, we stick this right at the very end here, uprooted. What he's saying is, it's already happened. It's a how do we say that? A foregone conclusion. Okay. So feeding themselves without fear. They are only taking care of their own needs. They are doing it under the guise of participating in their religious community. First, they suggested they lack authority. Secondly, with Balaam suggesting that they're taking money for giving prophecies. And all of that is just to take care of themselves. And it has nothing to do with their true commitment, which is to the benefit of the community and for others. I was actually really proud of David after, during and after the storm. Several of his posts, he talked about it would be silly if we didn't learn from this experience. So we should all be looking at, if this ever happened again, what should I do differently? What might I prepare for differently? Everybody should have some sort of plan. He says, my 95-year-old mother has a plan. Now, of course, his 95-year-old mother's plan is to call David, right? But at least she has a plan, okay? So his point was, why don't we think about this now so that you can be an asset to the community instead of a liability to the community? And that's what we're supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be an asset to the community around us, not a liability to them. Okay. Give me one more second. We're doing pretty good on time here. Verse 13. That's easy. That's pretty easy. Okay, we're going to take on one more verse. Knock some of this out. Verse 13. Wild waves of the sea, casting out their own shame like foam, wandering stars for whom the black of darkness is reserved forever. Couple positive verses there. So Jude continues with his metaphors. This guy is metaphorological about the character and the results of these false teachers. His next metaphor compares them to wild waves that produce nothing more than foam. Okay, so there's a similar passage in Isaiah 57:20. It says, "But the wicked are like the tossing sea, for it cannot be quiet, and its waters toss up refuse and mud." Now, the second part of this verse is not in the Septuagint. And this tells us that Jude was familiar with the Hebrew Bible as well as the Greek translation. There are similar passages in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Jude considers what they do as shameful. Okay, so casting out their own shame. The Mediterranean world is an honor and shame culture, right? So what Jude is doing is he is exposing their inner objectives, their real agenda, and revealing, he hopes, the shame involved in that agenda. So just pause there for a second. Let's go back to Genesis, the story of Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 2, 3, 4. So remember that the issue in the Garden of Eden was agendas, okay? So the snake had a hidden agenda. This is the word that is used there, is that he was crafty, right? What he's saying is that he's got another agenda that he's playing out that Eve couldn't see at that time. Okay. He's not, in other words, he's not being transparent. Okay. So these people also have a hidden agenda. So shame in the first century is not an inner feeling. Shame is a public display. So when Malach David, King David, says he feels shame, he is not talking about an inner state of guilt. So shame up to the first century is not a Greek idea of some inner feeling. It is a loss of public reputation. You can find remnants of the same thing in Italy today. So if you were in a Sicilian household, the worst thing you could do for the family is to shame the family. That doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. Your individual guilt doesn't matter as long as the family name wasn't besmirched. Okay? If you do anything to embarrass the family or harm its name, that is the most unforgivable sin possible. The same thing is true in Pakistan. And this is why Ahiz came to me at the end and he asked if I could adopt him as his father, right? Because he wanted to bring honor into that situation. So when Judah speaks of froth and foam and waves, he's talking about publicly viewable stuff. All right, wandering stars for whom the black of darkness is reserved forever. So we have now entered the realm of first century cosmology and astronomy. The Earth was the center of the universe. People lived on Earth. The planets rotated around the Earth in a geocentric model, and the stars were fixed points in heaven. Stars were often connected to angels, and there was a consistency and a stability to the cosmos. It wasn't chaos. Okay, his last metaphor is wandering stars. So understanding this metaphor requires some knowledge of astronomy in the first sentence. The stars were considered fixed and guided by angels. The planets moved, but the stars did not, exhibiting God's design. For the stars to wander, God's order would have to be changed. These people challenged the actual order of creation. They are acting in ways to destabilize the universe because stars do not wander. Stars stay put in their cosmology. Okay. Now, do we know stars move today? Yes, we know stars move today. But we're not talking about us. We're talking about how they understood it. Okay. So if I say to you, you're like a wandering star, I'm saying that you do not have any stability. Okay. I think Yeshua talked about shifting sands. You want to be on a rock or on the sand, right? Because the rock has a foundation, right? Otherwise, you're getting thrown around by tossing winds hither and thither. And I can't trust you because everything about you is unstable then. Okay. The behavior of these people is challenging the created order of things because the created order is fixed by God's decision. And they are acting in ways that are not just destabilizing the universe that I'm in, but they challenge the very creative order that God has put in place. Now, notice, Judah does not say burn in the fires of hell or cast in the lake of fire. Okay. These kind of metaphors do not show up here. You might ask yourself, where does the idea come from? If you do ask that question, you might want to read about the punishment for the fallen angels or the watchers in the book of First Enoch. For example, First Enoch 18:15, 21:6, 86:1, and 3, and 88, 1 and 3. Revelation 9:1, Isaiah 14:12-15, all suggest that wandering or fallen stars are fallen angels. These are the watchers in Enoch. So this compares the false teachers to fallen celestial beings with the same fate in mind. So they will end up in darkness, a metaphor for the final judgment, Matthew 8:12 and 22:13. So this image is found in non-canonical literature also, like Tobit 14:10 and the Psalms of Solomon 14:9. First Enoch 103:7 and 108:4, and also in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So these teachers, by copying the behavior of the fallen angels, will receive the reserved teteretai punishment designed for those fallen angels. Why? Because their actions are the same. Okay, so again, it's not about a thinking thing, it's an action thing. Hebrew is all about actions. It's all about discrete, measurable behaviors. Okay, the thinking stuff comes much later. Okay, we're going to pause there. That takes us to verse 14. 14 and 15 actually go together, so we'll be working through both of those next week. Let me click save there and pause.